picturesqueness in hippie classicism. My friend was like no other friend, the most outstandingly and typical of hippies. If he'll excuse me, but I simply can't resist describing him in something of his heyday, when in Varanasi a good friend of mine encountered him. I hadn't seen him for some years myself, but that encounter made such a profound impression on my friend that actually he wrote a book about it. John, forgive me if I give you now away, but you have changed your face so often, and you never have repeated any of your masks, so no one, I assure you, will from this description recognize you if he ever met you at some other time. His blonde hair reached his waist, he being Jewishly convinced that long hair like the Sikhs maintain ensured the strength both physically and of character. But add to this great silver earrings in both ears, the fancy dress of a most typical barefooted Hindu pilgrim, dressed in orange, beads and staff and beggar's bowl, and so on, teaching Westerners the ways of Varanasi by the Ganga and its holiness, and most intriguingly initiating them in other mysteries than they had ever heard of. This, my friend, who went on boating in a full moon on the Ganga, with the burning candles on the river to enhance the effect of the moonlight, blending with some fleeting corpses, was a Russian from St. Petersburg, who there enjoyed the one trip of his life, transforming him into some Atlantide philanthropist, seduced by the profound and irresistible initiation which my friend produced, a magic more abstruse than Castañeda's. Where are you now, my friend, and in which shape will you be present when I see you next at full moon by the Kanchenjunga, in the fullest glory of the Himalayas? If I know it, I will not betray it, so that I once more can keep you for myself. The fleeting spirit. The fleeting spirit of our love is you and me and something else between that never can be specified nor gratified, but moves us on incessantly on cosmic winds, blown everywhere but to ourselves, since this untouchability is the right essence, unidentifiable, of our love, more precious than we ever can imagine or get any relative idea of ourselves, since love belongs to us to merely escape us, leaving us enigmas only that cannot be solved, but something else between, a mutual understandability of things that no one else can get a distant hang of, miracles and powers unexplainable and constantly astounding us with new expressions and results. The fifth element, a lecture on the elements. The question is which element to choose, which one you best identify with, which is stronger or most likable. The first is earth, the solid matter, all that is concrete, which more often than not, however, is submerged and drowned by water. Water also quenches every fire. Fire, which devours all, is always powerless against it, except when it combines with air, which then can dry up any lake. Is air then the most powerful of elements, since nothing can subdue it, pin it down, or even see it? But there is in Buddhism a fifth element, denominated wood, which is organic. Of all organic forms, wood is the hardest and most enduring, which is why in Buddhism it has come to symbolize the essence of this fifth of elements, which is simply life. It is dependent on the other four. It has to breathe with air, it has to grow and live on earth, it can't do without water, and the fire is its energy. But basically, all four elements have together that one function only, to support the fifth and make it possible. The only really meaningful and interesting, important element, the toughest and most usable, long-living form of which is that most precious wood we all need knocking on at times. So let's just plant more trees, the most invaluable support of life, producing air that's oxygen, providing energy, enriching earth and binding the wild waters, and not take them down, for that would ruin everything on earth, to lose the fires and the waters, and impoverish the air. In short, a tree is of as much importance as the life of any man. Love portrait. How shall I define my love of you? It is not easy, since it has too many aspects. First of all, your beauty is not your first thing, and not what I love most in you, but what it is a mirror of, which is all that which is not seen, but the more strongly felt and recognized as something much more precious than your beauty. Let's go deeper into this, because here is the clue. The outward mirrors of your soul are so remarkable, reflecting depths and faculties that multiply your character into a maze of wonders and enigmas, but at the same time of wisdom and reliability, a singular trustworthiness and wonderful profundity and rare presentiment and foresight of, I would not hesitate to say, prophetic character. While at the same time you are honest like a child, your soul is bare and visible to all the world, which makes it quite inevitable that the whole world can but love you. Darjeeling. Silver beams illuminate the landscape and increase with constancy around the hills until they blind you into rapturous exhilaration for the mountain far above all others, so serenely highlighted in heavenly and perfect majesty by the enchanting morning glory rising from the sun. And in its shadow, this small village, like a child born from this paradise of beauty, living almost only from the beauteous charm of Kanchenjunga, so benevolently generous from this life-giving magic that immediately she naturally must become the queen of hills. Thou art the emperor and majesty, O Kanchenjunga, but your child Darjeeling mirrors this supremacy, and grows into the most desirable of queens by stealing irretrievably your heart and leaving, as you have to leave her, a nostalgia to ache for life, unless you constantly return. Universal minimalism. We are of a higher, better world than this one, where our dreams can meet and join each other in a cyberspace of nowhere and of everywhere, including all the dreams of humankind that share them with us in the extraordinary plus dimension of the sixth sense, extrasensory perceptions and what not. I know full well that you know what I mean. No further explanation is required. Let us just continue dwelling there, in bliss and beauty, meeting all our needs, and sticking to the motor of it all, the music of the spheres, the constant and eternal harmonies resounding throughout this minimalistic universe of more suns than the sum of grains of sand across the world, but merely perceptible to those initiated in this dream world, this resplendent essence of all harmony of life, this innermost and utmost centre of existence, this invaluable, priceless, precious thing called love. The same old story. When in the realm of heavenliness I think of our relationship and how we are like twins in souls born long before this life, united by our chosen destiny of musical ideals fought hard for, I'm like a blind man in my doubts and faltering in troublesome uncertainty to just maintain my course through darkness in my faithfulness to you and our ideals, which we have suffered for so much and pay so dearly just to find each other as inseparable friends on higher levels of affinity than ever can be gained by mortal forms of love. We are too close, now even at the furthest distance, ever to be able to dispense of our relationships which, in absence of our physical contactability, is only the more strongly felt in metaphysical dimensions. But all this is old and well-known stuff already, which, however, I can never tire of repeating. Humility. When you have travelled far for nothing, just to find yourself in perfect darkness, with no end to it, no bottom to the abyss, like a blind man without stick led down into a mine, it is a lesson only of orientation, and you must get through that darkness all alone. There is no other way, and no one to release you from that hellish course to nowhereness of nothing, but to just get through with it, the worse the better. For it is a lesson only, just another education, the best form of which is travel, which by trials certainly will teach you something of reality and accurate perspective, since reduced into a flying brittle autumn leaf, completely at the mercy of the winds of destiny, of passion, nature, politics, and maybe war, you will be privileged to see things as they are, from both above and through, and from the gutter, which remains the best of all perspectives, since down there you only can look up and move up and improve, and have things to look forward to, perhaps the only natural position and perspective, that of natural humility, which teaches you the underdog's philosophy of true survival, just observing, bowing, looking up, admiring all forms of life and loving it. From the bottom of despair, Himalayan realism from the traveller's diary, the turning point of this journey was on the 11th, when suddenly the weather changed, and even the most experienced trekker here has never met with anything worse. I was then in North Sikkim. It was not as bad as on November 9th, 95, when there were disasters all over the Himalayas and 14 people perished on Mount Everest, but almost next to it. Infection, insect bites and running noses, snoring roommates, sleepless nights and aching limbs, you just like tormenting yourself with furious scratchings of your wounds, you cough your lungs out, eyes are watering cascades, and everywhere you hear around you this tremendous Himalayan cough, the empty dryness of the hollow hoarseness like of horses. Snows and rains, the worst that ever trekkers met with, worse than even my friend veteran encountered by Mount Everest, and nightmares, worries, tortures, and laments. But still you carry on, enduring anything, just for the pleasure of surviving, even the worst thinkable ordeals, to one day finally return back home, to work, to humdrum winter weariness, to just a normal life instead of these extremes, however beautiful, revolting, educating, and adorable. Shambhala, Geographic Survey. The fabled kingdom transformed into Shangri-La is still a vivid and most real ideal, comprising all the ancient Buddhist kingdoms of the Himalayas, like Nepal and Sikkim, Bhutan and Tibet, Ladakh and Zanskar, Law, Mustang, and even Kashmir and Mongolia. Once a perfect and united realm, the capital of which was never found. But people say there still are endless caves under the mountains, leading to the sacred spot from where once all this perfect and harmonious world was ruled dynamically by the first of Buddhas, and the dream has never nor will ever die, like some kind of Asiatic messianism for all who live here, though a most concrete conception, no ideal in no time ever being too impossible, too good, nor too impractical to once be realized. Maya. She was just a woman and a mother, although Buddha's mother, like himself, an ordinary mortal, but has come to symbolize a human valuation of much higher worth than any deity. She has become a symbol for not only Mother Earth and Mother Nature, but for life itself and simple motherhood, the very instrument of constructivity, creation and protection. Above all criticism as such, incapable of any harm or evil, just the harmony of continuity, the perfect sweetness of one-sided positivism, the miraculousness of the talent to make something out of nothing, and the home of love undying, everlasting. All this is embalmed in this simplicity of motherhood, a simple human character, quite limited and mortal, but endowed with the supremest gift of making life, and thus more worthy than the holiest divinity for being only lovable. The music of the stars. The music of the stars is unknown, but to those who dwell among the stars and listen to the language of the gods and goddesses, that mortals cannot hear and therefore must deny. But we can hear them, we who fly among the stars, with open minds of musicality and open hearts, to anything that is not common but exclusive, just to those extraordinary souls unscarred by baseness, naturally esoteric, born out from the ether, and wandering like exiles and outsiders here on earth, with nothing to relate to except like-minded exceptions, who can understand the language of the stars and listen to it, and who therefore piously obliged by understanding to keep quiet of the secrets of the esoteric universe, since that is far too overwhelming in its beauty to be used for any means except creation and construction, are compelled by love to caution and sincere discretion, and the more so the more strong it is, since it must never risk the smallest misrepresentation, since the higher and the truer, the more sensitive and delicate. The Exile, Dharamsala, November 20th. The Tibetan poet Tenzin Tsundu, exiled from Tibet in India, has been placed under house arrest to prevent him from protesting with other Tibetan exiles, while the Chinese president Hu Jintao makes his 3 days visit here. Driven hard across the snows over the pass in wintry mountains, with frost-bitten feet and corpses on the way, shot brutally to death by occupation soldiers, or just stranded in the snows in freezing death, old people, children, mothers, victims of all kinds. Thus suffers the whole nation, driven out by brainwash propaganda and enforcement of autocracy, thus turning a whole people into prisoners and exiles in the country they themselves had built, and turned into a unique culture of philosophy, respecting life above all and tradition, with a wonderful flourishing sense for ceremonies, pompous, colourful and solemn as the perfect ordered party going on forever, until brutal inhumanity broke in with force and hate, intentionally wiping out a culture of 2,000 years, destroying 6,046 monasteries and temples out of 6,059, and burning manuscripts, handwritten books, 3/5 of all the libraries and treasuries of literature. And why? For sheer stupidity, the joy of violence, the glory of destruction, and the rape of beauty? For the triumph of the opposite of culture, human dignity, nobility, humanitarianism, compassion, to let evil with voluptuousness replace all virtue and all man's constructive efforts? The dictatorships and mad rapes of politics in the 20th century has turned the cultural protectors, humanists and lovers into exiles in this world of barbarism and cruelty. And it goes on, the rape of beauty by barbarity, not only in Tibet but everywhere, by blind and brutal brainwash from the media and politics, through the carelessness and greed and ignorance of mankind. The problems of esotericism. The unacceptability of esotericism is that it is esoteric, that is, for its inaccessibility reserved for just the happy few, since only those with an advanced mind and intelligent profundity of understanding can at all get any hang of it, since it is practically totally incomprehensible. Already the philosopher Pythagoras saw fully this predicament, wherefore he simply didn't make it any clearer, but just let it be, as most deep thinkers all since then have also done, from Plato and Plotinus, from the Essenes to the Kabbalists, from the Freemasons and Hermeticism to Rosicrucians, from the Master Eckhart to the Jesuits and the Illuminati, to the manifold secret societies of our day, of obstinate, forever hibernating hippies, to the children of New Age and the freethinkers of all ages, all heretics, outcasts, outsiders and aliens, who, unlike all common people who just live on earth, see life from outside, looking into it. Just another flow. Melt in tears and let the flood of warmth run over all the coldness of the world to let it know what tears are for tenderness and care, compassion and all good things that make life worth living, and above all feelings, deep and honest, of the heart and soul that ever need expression, and the warmest, softest, sweetest and sincerest evidence, expression, outlet and manifestation of your feelings are your tears, whether you cry for beauty, joy or sorrow, or for anything at all, but they release you, always being the original and truest food for love that never can be given out in vain. The portrait. Let me take with me your picture of your absolute consummate beauty, to keep locked up in my heart forever for the eyes of no one else but me, the only one to fully worship and appreciate your beauty, unforgettably perceived and photographed by my mind's eye, to keep it as the highest and most incomparable of treasures, to look upon in precious moments of supremest privacy, to thereby stay in touch with you, in love imperishable, never to be perfectly consumed, but only, every time I look upon it, more aggrandized, and the more so, the more I may live and long beyond my dying days. Home to the dead. Returning to normality from educating, edifying journeys and adventures in the world of beauty, teaching you humility and culture of a different perspective from above to humdrum Western mainstream brainwash, over-technocrated, automated, sterilized, where 1/7 of the population go on psychic medicines as legal drug addicts, which is considered comme il faut, no matter if it breaks you down. It is quite normal to be burnt out from just sitting by a keyboard in a cubicle, and in the long run thus civilization certainly will follow you in breaking down, dissolving down the drain. This reinitiation in the Western brainwash of perdition is the worst ordeal you can experience, coming from a real world of ideals and truth and beauty, to a snake pit of degeneration and decay, and all that you can do is to endure it, do the best of it, survive and struggle on, alone for your ideals in obstinate persistence, just to spite the mortal blind way down of mankind, for the hope of the necessity of the occasion of the turning of the tides. Politiska mord. En agent i London blir förgiftad enligt gammalt KGB-recept med renaste radioaktivitet, ett medel som blott supermakter kan begagna, men det Ryssland, som var ensamt om att ha motiv till mordet, blånekar naturligtvis, som Putin också gjorde när den tidigare journalisten Anna Politkovskaja blev mördad, nerskjuten i hissen till sitt hem på maffiavis med 5 dödliga kulor, vilket mord då också bara Ryssland hade något alls motiv till. Saken blir ej bättre av att Litvinenko, den i London mördade agenten, just var ute för att forska i det tidigare mordet på den modiga, envisa Anna Politkovskaja. Men Putin och politikerna resonerar så. Vem har väl tid och råd och orkat bry sig? Världen rasar ändå samman genom katastrofer, aids, malaria och tuberkulos, växthuseffekt och översvämningar. Så vad bryr vi oss om politiska små mord, ett eller två, ett dussin eller två, när det ju ändå måste glömmas och försvinna i den globala, vanliga, katastrofala statistiken. Political murders. A secret Russian agent is in London poisoned in the old way of the KGB by radioactive means, which only superpowers have the means of, but that Russia, which alone was motivated to the murder, does of course deny it, as did Putin when the journalist of civil courage, Anna Politkovskaya, was murdered, shot down in the elevator of her home, with no less than 5 mortal bullets in the ordinary mafia style, which murder also only Russia could have any motive for. Things don't look any better, as the murdered London agent Litvinenko was investigating the aforesaid murder of the lovely Anna Politkovskaya. But Putin and the politicians reason with some realistic cynicism. Who cares? Who has the energy and time to bother when the world goes down the road to ruin anyway by AIDS, catastrophes, malaria, TBC, the global warming and ever-increasing floods? We can afford to overlook some small politic murder, 1 or 2, a dozen or another, since they must be soon forgotten anyway and disappear in the most boring usual flow of normal global catastrophical statistics. Love declaration. I love you. Let these words be stamped forever in eternity, no matter who am I, no matter who you are, just to make sure the pure sincerity of how much I love you outstandingly forever. Let it be and let it work and let it live and let it never die, because that is the only life for me, without which I will be as barren as a desert, bored to death by thirst and hunger and depravity, since you are all I ever cared for, whether drunk or sober, mad or sensible. You are the source of life and cure for anything, the only absolute insurance of there being any life at all, and for there being any meaning of existence, and for any continuity at all, for any love or any meaning of it. Midnight conversations. In the darkness of midnight, far away beyond ourselves, we meet and join in timelessness, like two spirits moulded into one by the truth of this momentary eternity. This bliss is the supremest of this life, and the miracle of it the most incredible. The eyes go out, and we live by hearing only, sweet soft words from barely audible voices, the loveliest of this life, only because they understand each other, and thereby comprise each other, in the pious breathless embrace of eternity. This union is this moment which, if you have experienced it, you can but always pray for its remaining and continuing forever.